The most important thing, believe. That's the hardest thing, but it's the most important thing. And it has to be, true and through without. I think that the deeper belief, the deep knowing that you can have and be also being okay, like if that belief changes and just continuing to honor that new truth is incredibly important. Sometimes when people think that they're reaching their inner potential, the first path that they take may not be the right path, but it may be the right path to get them to their next path. So just continue to believe that what you're feelings are your inner guidance system. And I think that the more that people tune into that and stop resisting things for the logical reasons, the happier they'll be and the farther they'll go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to It's the Bearded Man podcast with your favorite, the world's favorite bearded man, Bob Bay. Each week with our guest episodes, I try to put the spotlight on someone who in my eyes is living their most authentic life. Our guest today is from Redondo Beach, California. At the age of 21, she was diagnosed with colon cancer and battles Crohn's disease. After being introduced to a class of superfoods of adaptogens and adding them into her diet, she was cancer-free within 3 months. She then created Toto, formerly Madeby, which is a vegan cookie dough using powerful superfoods in a delicious way that no one could resist. I'm telling you right now, they are fantastic. For all the OG Bearded Man followers, she was the guest for episode 135 of Purpose in the Youth podcast. Today on the podcast, Sydney Webb.
Woo!
She's here.
I'm here.
She's arrived.
I have arrived.
Second podcast we've ever done.
I know. I was just thinking about that today. I can remember just so well where I was in my life the last time that we met.
Yeah, literally. So that was June of 2019.
So
when I think we probably recorded it maybe at the end of May, but it came out, I think, the first or second week of June of 2019. So that's literally...
It honestly feels like longer than that ago. I think because last year was just such a crap show.
Totally.
But yeah, time flies.
I know, it's
time
crazy.
It really does fly.
I was so weirdly hyped when you had came through to do that podcast, and living in Sun Valley, California, there wasn't a lot going on out there. But when you had told me that was the HQ for where you guys were baking your cookies,
now.
I was like,
yeah,
all right, something good's out of
other than my podcast.
There were some good things that were coming out of Sun Valley.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's so crazy. Like 24 months, 25 months later, and here we are. What's the biggest change in you as an entrepreneur since then? Because there's been a lot that has changed.
Yeah. I honestly feel like every part of me has changed, really. I think that, at that time, I was a one-woman show. I was doing everything, and I mean everything, from baking everything, delivering everything, posting all the social media pictures, responding to all the emails. So I think a big change has been like now we have a team, and it's been so special, but also difficult in a different way, being able to hand out and hand off those responsibilities. I think that I'm getting much better at asking for help when I need it instead of just leaning into the thought or the idea that I have to do it on my own. I think that's been a huge, huge, huge learning for me. And the more that I do it, the more I realize why didn't I do this sooner?
You got to delegate as soon as possible.
Totally.
And that's the other thing too, is when you're in it and you're starting off, you're so used to doing everything yourself that you know the way how things should be done, and so you think that trying to trust somebody else is actually not going to be productive because you're going to have to double check the work. You're going to have to show them what they did wrong. But then eventually at some point, they understand the process. They understand what you're looking for. Then allows you to focus on the bigger picture items.
Yeah, it's definitely scary when it's your baby and you know it better than anyone else. But I think that the biggest win across the board has been we've just been so fortunate to bring on people that are so deeply, equally passionate. And I think beyond anything, passion has always been one of the most important AKA skills to hire for, because you can't teach that to somebody. I think that in the beginning, I just kind of went into it expecting they should know how to do this, or they should know how we operate. But just taking a step back and taking a pause to just really be fully 110% present in training them and educating them on our ethos and telling them about my story and why it's so important. Then it's you give them the fuel that they need, and it's no longer this back and forth. They have that fire that burns within inside them to go.
Yeah, I think what's so obvious to me about your story and your brand and why you do what you do is the reasoning of why. It's pretty much it's creating a product that you needed, excuse me, that you've seen the benefits from, and now wanting to give that to the people in their masses. And that just immediately, I just think of like working for Liquid IV and the why, changing the world, helping people hydrate and live better lives, which then even inspires the people that work for you, because it's not just about making money. It's not just about how much product can we sell this month. It's about what's the grand purpose. And I think that's so clear to me about why you do what you do. How do you know when somebody's the right fit? I know you said passion, but like even then it's like, how do you shake out passion in someone in a quick interview? Is there a certain question? Is there a certain personality or trait about somebody that you know, this is like green light, this is somebody I need to hire?
That's a really good question. I think that hiring was something that I thought was going to be so much easier than it's been, because there is so many moving parts, especially as like, you know, this really cute baby startup. We have so much changing every single day in the last few months. Like the entire structure of our team has changed, our operations have changed. And so I think someone who is incredibly, you know, they're flexible and they're willing to roll with the punches and adapt. The adaptability is huge. And so I think that it's been really a very interesting like pull between like, okay, we want to have someone on board that like has experience doing this, but also if you hire someone that almost, you know, that's only been within the corporate world in a very different company structure, they may, even though they're incredibly skilled at what they do, those skill sets may not translate into being what we need right now. So I think looking for someone who has taken a company from A to B or from B to C is really important, and kind of matching that skill set with where you are in that moment, because there are some gems that will be with you from the beginning of your company to the end, but more often than not, you know, you'll have to bring in these different people when you get to these different points. So I think the adaptability has been huge, and matching those skill sets with what we need, and not getting too ahead of ourselves by getting someone too senior, but also having someone, like I said, with that basis level experience.
Yeah, startup world, you have to be willing to think on the fly.
Oh yeah,
and you have to
outside of the box all the time.
Yeah, there's pros and cons obviously to working to a major corporation. I've never had experience working in that world, but there's security, there's like, this is your one role and that's it. Whereas obviously startup, most people are wearing multiple hats. And even then, your position can completely change. Like I started as creative in Liquid IV, and then now I'm in sales. Like you would not imagine that shift happening, but it naturally happened, and it was honestly one of the best things that could have happened. But if you don't have that mindset of being kind of open to where your leadership trusts and believes you should be, you're just going to resist it, and it's just not going to be good, and nothing productive is going to happen from it.
Exactly. Adaptability is everything, especially in the beginning, because you do have to wear so many hats. Yeah.
It's crazy. Obviously, I think the biggest, even just thinking about the last 2 years within both of our lives, there's a lot that's changed. One thing that immediately is a big change, and this happened more so in just the last couple of months, is a rebrand.
Yes.
Talk to me about that process, because honestly, I think you did it so flawlessly, which I know there was probably a lot of headaches and like stressing about like, one, do we do this? Two, do we follow through with it? Three, how do we like tell the world about it? Like, I think just the rebrand process of a business is so difficult to do, but from outside looking in, it seems like you and the team have done it well, and it seems like it didn't really affect much. What was the process like, and why?
Yeah, so I think maybe I'll start with the why. So Toto was formerly Madeby, and the name Madeby came from really my direct experience of healing, and I wanted to help people to define what they were made by. And I think that obviously the inspiration still stems from my story. But I really wanted to build something that was beyond myself and could live on without me necessarily being connected to it. I really wanted to build a brand and a movement, not just like, this is my company that I'm building for myself. And so the name Toto, the phrase in Toto means whole, complete or in its entirety in Latin. And we wanted something that was going to embody not only my story, but most importantly, the way that the products make people feel and like what they embody within themselves and how we want to operate within the world. So it was really like this idea of like, okay, what is our overarching mission here? And like, how could a rebrand help us structure that? So I think that was, once we decided that we were going to, and we really wanted to have a bigger message even within our name, that was step one. Once we decided on a name, it was all the logistical, things behind the scenes. It was, from figuring out what our packaging was going to be to who was going to design things for us to, it happened. I would say we rebranded rather quickly, from like start to finish. I think we got everything done in about 3.5 months, which might sound like a long time, but it went so quickly. And we worked with an amazing agency to help us redo everything and really like bring our vision and mission to life. I think that part of the reason that we wanted to do this rebrand, and if you go back and see all of the former Made by things, the vibe was very different. And it was definitely a strategic play for us. If you look at our packaging and branding now, it's very fun, it's very bright, it's very happy and inviting. And part of my mission when I started all of this was to really be able to bring these healing, powerful, nourishing, life-changing things to people that wouldn't normally seek them out. So by blending this idea of maybe more familiar, bright, conventional with these very obscure, weird, air quote, weird things that people have never heard of before, it's like a sense of familiarity. So I think that when you're introducing something new into people's lives, there has to be something for them to connect it to, or else it's going to seem too weird.
Was it a difficult decision to go from selling products that were already ready to eat to then now it's out of a conventional dough and you have to bake it? And
so I would say yes and no. Obviously, I know people love the cookies, which can still be made
fantastic.
From the dough.
10 out of 10. 10 out of 10 on the Bearded Man review.
The reason was really more so thinking of like what our goals are with the company, and our goals are really to expand nationwide in retail. And since the product has no preservatives or anything of any kind, it's pretty much impossible to be able to ship something nationwide with like a 2-week shelf life and get it in people's hands and in their fridge and, consumed all within that period of time. So I was never like changing the recipe was never even a question for me. I was like, okay, well, we just need to find another way to deliver this to people in the form that it is. And so the cookie dough, same exact recipe, same exact everything. It's just in dough form. So, and it lasts 3 to 4 months depending on the flavor. So it'll allow us to go into, nationwide distribution and get into people's homes and all of those things. And really it's just about access. It gives us better access to people.
Smart to think about that now before it becomes a problem where you're like, you're probably already feeling it come down on you, so it's like, all right, we got to make some changes.
Got to figure it out now. Yeah.
Whew, that's tough. That is a hot seat to be in.
It is a hot seat to be in, and if there's anyone out there listening about thinking about starting a refrigerated product, my sentiments are sent to you. Sending you love and all the best luck. If you need anything, reach out. That was just also, another challenge. I've never done this before, and so there were so many questions. Still every day I'm like, well, how are we going to do this? Let's think of the logistics of XYZ. And it's not as simple as like just making a decision. Sometimes there's just there's many different implications of one small change.
Yeah. Talking to founders just like blows my mind. 'Cause I'm like, all right, how do I deliver more content social media wise? Like that's my biggest struggle. Is like, how do I get more
That's
eyeballs?
also not easy.
No, it's not, but you even have to also do that on top of then sell the product and then get it to somebody. So it's a whole nother logistical nightmare that it's like, man, I learned so much in just trying to build a brand through social media content, which is really just asking for people's time and attention. Never mind then say, hey, would you like to buy the product? Like you have to do the same thing where you have to curate something that's going to grab people's attention and then emotionally connect with them to a point where they go, I actually want to give you my money to then buy this. So it's just, I have so much respect for entrepreneurs. And then even living with Robbie and really
Yeah.
seeing it in the last 7 months, I'm just like, you have my blessings, sir. You have my blessings.
I love it. I love it. And I will say, though, to your point about video content and people's time, I think that especially now as things change within like the brand world, I've seen some of the most successful companies are the ones that can do exactly that, like buy more time from people online, because the more people are engaged with you and feel like they know you personally, then it's beyond, this just tastes good. Especially if you're in like a saturated market. I've just seen so many brands doing it so incredibly well, and that's something that we're really leaning into over the next 6 months.
Yeah. How do you think a brand, what's the best tactic a brand can do? Because I know we were talking about this last night. Like, how do you emotionally connect with somebody on a deep level to build a relationship just through brand, not before you even sell the product? How do you think a brand should be approaching building that emotional connection with somebody so that when they see the logo, it kind of like invokes something within them?
Yeah. I think it's probably the same but different for each brand. One brand that I know that's doing it incredibly well, and I've talked about them at like to an extent with so many different people, is a company called Midday Squares. You familiar?
You talked about it last night?
Yes. Yeah, okay,
You're
exactly.
literally,
I told you.
Are you a brand ambassador for them?
I should be. They do such an incredible job. It's a functional chocolate bar, which if you think, you have you're going against the Hershey's and the Nestle's and the Milky Ways and these huge monopolies within the chocolate space. And so one thing that they've just owned is the storytelling. And their brand is like being bold and showing everything. So on their Instagram, and they also have a podcast, they just show absolutely everything. They show the founders going to therapy. They show the founders, dealing with issues in the production room. They show absolutely every little piece you can imagine, and they turn it into like almost these little reality show snippets. And it's fascinating because you feel so involved. You know what's going on. When I met them in person a few months ago, I, was going to ask it's a married couple and a brother and sister. They're all founders. And I almost asked them, like, how are you guys doing? Like, did that argument pan out? When I had never even met them before. And that was my first conversation with them, but yet I felt like I knew them so well already. And I've been preaching their product to everybody I know here because I love them as people so much. And they've just done such an incredible job building relationships with people. So for them, I think that they own, like, bold and showing everything. But I will say, as like a blanket statement for companies in general, I think the more that you can show who runs the company and what you do, like essentially the behind the scenes of what it actually takes, it is so incredibly interesting to your audience, because a lot of the times with big companies, you have no idea who runs the company. It becomes this entity, and it's no longer people, actual physical human beings that are working on this every day. So I think that the more that you can make people feel like they know you and hopefully actually really get to know them, the more, that's like the long game for sure. You can run Facebook ads, or you can put up blog posts and put up YouTube videos, and all of that's amazing. But I think the more that you can genuinely find a way to connect and engage on a regular basis is a game changer.
Yeah. And we talked about this last night, but Gary Vee's been preaching this since like 2015.
Yeah.
Since I started paying attention.
He's one of the
like,
OGs.
It doesn't matter if you're a brand, if you're trying to build a product or a personal brand, like, you need to become a media production company. And that's not, and when he says that, he doesn't necessarily mean like you need to create your own ads, you need to create your own visual content for your product or your service, but more so just showing people the process.
People just want to know you.
People just want to know you. The one day, I've only ran into Gary Vee a couple times in my life, but one day I'm going to get on one knee the next time I see him and thank him, because so much of what helped me build my brand and my story was my unapologeticness of just like showing the behind the scenes of driving the Uber life.
Yes.
And even just like the process of like the last podcast, Purpose Needs, where it was like, I mean, this podcast is still in my bedroom studio. But even then, just showing people that, like, I didn't realize at the time, like, how fortunate I was to have that confidence to show it, because I didn't give a fuck. Like, I was like, I'm out here in the Uber, I got my lunch, I'm eating it, going on hour 10 of driving. Like, it just didn't, I didn't feel any less than anybody else. Yeah. And it was solely because Gary Vee had just like infused this into my brain of like, whatever you do, just own it, and that's going to build on brand, and it's going to add to your story. So whether you're the Uber driver, or whether you're the startup founder, or whether you are the chef, or whether you are in the process of becoming a police officer in the training, like just showing, and we're seeing on TikTok, what goes viral on TikTok is people showing the process, showing the process of something. Yep. And so I just think people want to know you. They might love the product, but they want to know the person behind it. And there's no better time than now than to show that, whether it's podcast, YouTube, or visual content.
I think it's fascinating because before now, I think like you don't, unless you were going to YouTube to watch like a how it's made video, or like actually seek out this information kind of to like, you know, you'd have to go digging to find any sort of behind the scenes, because a lot of companies probably just didn't even film any of it before. But now the access that people feel like they have to be able to see that is huge. Yeah. It's so different.
It's unbelievable. Another big thing that happened for you this year was, I know you went through like fundraising in the beginning of the year, which to me seems like, not a fun process. Maybe you have the best time of your life, but I can't even imagine that process in of itself. But how do you convince people to, you know, we're just talking about selling a product and getting people to obviously buy it, but more so, not even are you just selling a product, but you're selling the why, right? How did you approach getting people to see your vision and seeing your story to want to buy into you in the product and wanting to be a part of what you were building?
I don't think I've ever met a founder that has ever loved fundraising. If there's one out there, I'd love to know them. But even when you're in a great situation and everything's going well, like it's definitely easier. But it's a full-time job in and of itself. You know, having conversations with people and since this was our first time, like I'd say maybe about half of the people that I had conversations with were people that I didn't know before. And so some people I already knew, you know, we had that relationship already. But for the people that don't know you, not only is it their first impression of you, but then you're also convincing them of the vision. You know, obviously the product is a big piece of it. Like if they like it and they're enjoying it, that's a big thing for most people. But I think that one thing that I learned is, like, to our point with the videos, is that for any founder planning to raise money, you have to learn and own and practice your ability to tell a story. It is, I've had the same advice from so many other different founders within the food and beverage space and other spaces as well. A lot of the times, especially when you're an early company and you don't have a ton of data and you don't have a ton of, you know, here's my last 5 years of sales, you're really selling the story and yourself, obviously. And if the product's great, amazing. It definitely helps your case. But I think that and not all founders are going to be that person that are, you know, maybe they're more shy. Maybe they aren't the best person to tell a story, but finding someone who is going to be that best face for you to tell your story makes all the difference. And I think knowing who you're talking to is also extremely important. So for example, if I knew I was going to talk to someone who had a lot of experience in operations and had run, you know, a really large company, I would make sure to reiterate like how we plan to work our operations and why that was so important. And just the story itself doesn't change. The vision and the goals never change. I think it's just about knowing your audience and knowing how to tell a story. And the more confidently you can do that and the more convincing you can be, the easier everything else becomes.
Yeah, I would imagine too, it's just like putting in reps. Like your first time pitching is not as...
it was so uncomfortable. Yeah. I didn't even... I truly didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to physically ask someone if they were interested in investing, because I was terrified. I was like, this feels weird. I'm not comfortable asking for people for money, because I've just always kind of been a person like, you want something, you go out there, you get it yourself. And so it was it was a challenging process at first, but now I know, like, the next time that we raise money, it'll just feel like you said, just putting in the reps.
Yeah.
A lot easier the next time around.
Oh boy, I can only imagine.
A lot easier the next time around. Yeah, I think that product, storytelling, and know your audience. The most important piece is obviously, like, I should say, most of the time, the most important piece is the product. Making sure that you have some sort of competitive advantage. Because, there's always going to be people popping up left and right. We've even seen it in our space too. And so I think your competitive advantage doesn't necessarily just need to be something about the product. Like, for example, Midday Squares, they're a chocolate bar. There's a ton of other chocolate bars, but their competitive advantage is their ability to storytell and their media. And so it doesn't just have to be one thing. Your competitive advantage can be your story. It can be how you're going to get people behind the brand. I think just honing in on what those things are going to be for you, or like what you want to do first before you start hopping on the phone.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like, if I'm somebody that's open to having conversations about investing in a company, then obviously my first thing is, what's the product? Okay, cool. Now I understand that. But what's the foundation they're building on? Like,
they want to know how you're going to protect their money.
Yeah, of course. We don't want my 10 grand just getting flushed down the drain. You've been dating Steve Odell, co-founder of Tens of Tea, for quite some time. He was a past guest of this pod for episode 86. What is one pro to dating another entrepreneur and one challenge?
You already know he's going to be listening to this. So.
Oh, he's going to turn up the volume right now, shut down the laptop.
Oh gosh. Okay. I mean, there's a lot of pros. I met Steve when I was I basically started my company out of our apartment, just before we met. And so it's been really special to be able to, like, build this alongside of each other while he's also building a company. And I mean, he's like a stand-in co-founder to me. I just ask him so many things throughout the day. He's still extremely productive. Don't worry, everybody. He's still getting all the stuff done. But it's been so helpful because he's been through a lot of the same things that I've been through. And so, on the days where I'm having a small mental breakdown or a giant mental breakdown, he knows what's on the other side of that. And I know that deep down too, but sometimes you just need someone else to tell you.
Yeah.
So big pros, I would say, having someone to confide in that understands, and can just continue to motivate you to be better and to grow and to push yourself. He's also another pro. I'd put this in the pro category. He's challenged me to do things that I really dislike. I'm not someone who in the past loved financials and numbers and
sounds like my nightmare.
All of the projection goodness. But I've learned I wouldn't say I love it, but like I can do it now, and I feel a lot more confident in my ability to do that. So I think he pushes me to become a better version of myself because he sees my potential, and he has been a deep believer and seen literally the day one of me making things out of our apartment to driving things to go deliver it to locations. And he's seen this evolution of like what it's become over the last couple of years. One con is I think our brains don't ever really shut off. And so, we'll finish working for the day, but then we're still talking about whatever's going on. What do you think about this? And it's honestly, it's a great thing, but I think it's, we have to make a very, very specific time to like, okay, we're not going to talk about work. We're just going to unplug. It's important. Very important.
Well, the first thing of being, let's go off of that. I think it's a great thing that you both clearly love what you do. Mm-hmm. So you don't mind, talking. It's just so like part of your life that it's just like, it's a lifestyle, mm-hmm. like it's a really, I do hear you because I do the same where it's like I need to pick certain times in my week where I'm not like talking about work, but at the same time it's like I fucking love what I do, so I'm gonna talk about it. I'll talk to you any hour of the day, but obviously there are other times where it's like, all right, let's like cut this time frame and we're not talking about anything.
I've learned that I need that time to just like completely detached to be able to come back,
but to go to what you were just saying about like the financials, right? And it's not really what you enjoy to do, but you learn to do it. And I think that is like the one thing outside looking in, and the reason I always love talking to founders is because it's like, as a founder, you have to be willing to do the things you don't want to do. And so most CEOs and founders, like even if they grow to that $200 million business at a high level, they can still have a conversation in a financial meeting, in a marketing meeting, in an operations meeting, in a sales meeting, because to get from 0 to 200, they at one point had to just do everything themselves. So that's the one thing I've always respected about people like yourself, where it's like you recognize not really something I love to do. I don't really care to be in the Excel too much, but it's part of building the business.
Totally. And I think having a baseline knowledge of these things is really important, especially when you want to bring on people and hire them. Obviously, sometimes there's going to be, if we brought on a CFO, I would expect them to know a lot more than I do, but I would know the baseline of like what needs to get done. And it would be really exciting to be able to learn from them too. But I do think, being able to have a baseline knowledge of everything, be a really fantastic generalist is like necessary.
You're gonna start shifting from the executor to the delegator, and having people do the things that maybe aren't your favorite parts of the business, but at least you can have a conversation and understand whatever it is that they're talking about. This is where we're gonna kind of shift more into you, because I think we've gotten some updates on the business stuff. But May 18th, you had posted something along the lines of, quote unquote, lately I've realized how unsexy self-love really is most of the time. It's not always bubble baths and face masks. Sometimes it's being conscious enough to pull yourself out of the spiral when you start to fall in. What self-love practices help you be the best version of yourself? And also, interesting enough, because we've had to reschedule a couple times, but this Saturday actually happens to be National Self-Love Day. So
I love that.
I think the self-love, self-care day, so the timing couldn't be better. But what are some practices that help you be the best version of yourself?
I think for the most part, there's a few things that have been like core to me keeping my sanity. One thing that I've implemented again as of recently is working out in the morning. I grew up an athlete, and physical fitness is like incredibly important to me, not from a aesthetic perspective, but just from the way I feel. My brain, it's like night and day how I feel and how I can focus when I've just done some movement in the morning. So for me, that's a non-negotiable. I will work out first thing when I wake up. And I just feel so much better. And then when I get home, I will journal and read for about 30 minutes to an hour. I do everything typically before like 8 a.m. ish. So I've like had a good chunk of the morning to myself. And that's really like my time to pause, to breathe, to reflect. Then I'll do I call them sprints throughout the day. Sprint, get all this work done. And then I will typically towards the end of the day go on another walk I walk about 5 miles towards the end of the day.
Wow.
Just again, it has nothing to do with like, I'm not trying to get my steps in. I need it like to reprocess everything. It's almost like the morning is like my time to ground myself. I get settled in for the day. I, hone in on what I need to do. At the end of the day, I still have so much energy like built up inside of me that I need to like
get it out
decompress. So I'll go on a walk, and typically throughout the day, there's a million things running through my mind of like, oh, well, we need to do this and that and this and that. And a lot of the day is spent like on the executing. And so sometimes I'm on my walks. It'll be like, that's where a lot of ideas come. Or if I'm stressed about something throughout the day, I've developed this new technique where I'll put in my AirPods and like as if I'm on a call, and I will just start talking to myself. But I put the AirPods in for effect, so people think I'm talking to someone. But I will just start talking and saying all of the anxieties and the fears that I'm having. Like, I'm worried that this won't happen on time, or I feel anxious, like I'm worried how this is going to go. And once I start speaking these things out loud, I can't even tell. It sounds so simple, and sometimes the things that work the best really are the most simple. But it has made such a difference for me, because typically all of these fears are extremely unfounded, and the likelihood of them actually coming true is like slim to none. But it doesn't mean that they don't still come up. So being able to say them out loud, I like recognize how absurd they are. I'm like, okay, now I can get over it. It's out of my system. So yeah, that's also been super helpful.
I love the fact that you put in the AirPods so
For
that
effect.
you're now for not effect, so that if
People
somebody's
don't
walking
think
by, they're not thinking you're crazy. You're just like talking aloud, like get this out of your head. But that's also interesting because I remember at Tracy's going away party when we had to write notes and throw it in the fire, and it was about what are the things in your life that you want to get rid of, or I think it was also like what are things that call in. You had talked about, I think it was limiting beliefs. What are there certain limiting beliefs that have been common in your life, even in the last year, or what were some of those that kind of came to mind that made you write limiting beliefs?
I really think that my most common limiting belief now has come up as a result of my increased responsibility. And I think, as you grow, it's such a blessing that you're surrounded by, people that are doing bigger and better things than you. And so I think part of what I was experiencing was a bit of like imposter syndrome, like, who am I? I don't have all this experience. Like, I don't even have a co-founder. I'm doing this alone. Like, am I qualified enough to be the person in my shoes? And so I was having a lot of fears around being the only person leading my company. And I mean that in the most like honest and transparent way, because I looked to so many other successful companies. I was like co-founder. And it's so empowering to be the sole person making the decisions and guiding the vision. But I think when I felt the weight of this responsibility really on my shoulders, I was like, oh my God, like this is all on me. Yeah. And it's great and it's exciting and it's amazing. But I think I was just like, I had a moment where I was like, kind of having a freak out. But those moments of breakdowns typically for me really happen right before a big breakthrough. And so it'll typically take me getting to a point of like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm going to implode. And then I like explode in a good way, Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring up the founder and co-founder because that was like something I think it was on a Guy Raz podcast of How I Built This. And he talked, I don't forget who he was talking to, but one of the actually it was in his book. I read his book a couple months ago. And one of the common themes or common questions that this VC would ask is, do you have a co-founder?
Yes.
Because they recognize how much pressure it is when you are starting up.
Yep.
And if it's all on you, the likelihood of you succeeding might be lower than if the pressure was split across two people. But I also think just you having Steve to lean on and on top of all the other incredible people that I know you're surrounded by, whether it's founders or influencers or people that do things at a high level, that even if you don't have a co-founder, you still have people to lean on, which then gives you the fuel to obviously keep
100%. Yeah, I know exactly the statistic you're talking about because I went through that process when I was fundraising. That I was asked, like, do you have a co-founder? Do you plan on bringing one on? And I think just owning that, like you said, I even though I am the only founder, I'm not the only person now on my team. Now we have a team.
That's it.
Now we're a team.
Building it up, baby. Building it up. Also interesting because like I said, I prepped for this podcast a couple weeks ago. Now things are fucking spiking with this Delta. But there was a quote you had. I think you had written this a couple months ago too. I pull a lot of quotes because I think there's always depth to it. But you had said, "What if this global shutdown was really a breakdown, so we could finally have a breakthrough?" What for you have been some of the biggest takeaways from the pandemic and all the stillness?
That's a really good question. I think for me, one of the first things that comes to mind is like the immediate group of who I was surrounding myself with on a regular basis. I think that I'm so fortunate to know so many amazing people. And I think that for me, first year and a half of me building Madeby by myself was so incredibly time consuming, life consuming, that I didn't really see a lot of people. Amen. And so, which was, I was prepared for that sacrifice or for that decision. And so I really missed so much like the deep connection aspect of my life.
Yep.
And having those people I could call, 3 a.m., 2 a.m. and for anything. And I know that those people still existed all along, but it was more so of like me actually feeling and recognizing that for myself. So I think that when I was kind of like in the middle of COVID, or maybe even, towards the beginning, I took a look at who I was immediately surrounded by, and like who do I feel inclined to text and like check in and see what's going on and make sure they're okay, and see if their family's doing okay. And I realized, even with some of the friends that I did see during the pandemic, I became very, very deeply aware of my energy on my way to see them, and my energy on, when I was done hanging out with them. And I really took inventory of like, okay, how do I feel energized, and do I feel lit up and happy and inspired, or do I feel like, well, yeah, I guess it was like cool to pass the time, but like I don't feel like a better person coming out of that. And I don't mean that in any sort of like, like way to be mean at all. I think it's just, there's
different waves. You're on different waves of life.
Exactly. And I think that one of my main focuses over the last 6 months was like just really calling in and accepting and putting myself in the position to have that deep connection again. And it's so funny because so many of these people who have been close friends who I just hadn't seen in a while, like it was like I almost felt like I was letting down the floodgates, like they had been there all along just waiting on the sides. And when I finally like actually started to see people again and asked to hang out, it was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how much I really missed this. So reevaluating like friendships and what that means for me has been huge. And then I think also just like how I'm spending my time. I think that obviously a lot of it is spent, working on stuff for Toto, but I've just realized I feel like I have a lot of moments that people have on their deathbed on a regular basis in a good way, not in a morbid way. But I feel one question that it's come up for me a lot is like, if I died tomorrow, or if I found out that I only had, a year left on this planet, like how would I want to spend it? I'm so passionate about what I'm building, not because I love building a food business. That's just a vehicle to spread a bigger message. And the message is really, that is the whole purpose of why I'm doing this. But aside from that, how much is that message going to mean when I'm missing those deep connections, when I'm not taking that trip because I was busy, building out a projections document, or and I think so finding that balance for me has been so important to like really, to the best of my ability, work Monday through Friday only, and really take a break to like enjoy and be in the moment on the weekend, so I can get back to doing things full speed ahead on Monday. It's not a perfect science, but it's gotten much, much better, and I've just realized the way that I feel is like night and day. I mean, so like everything you just talked about has been my whole process of like anybody that's starting something, whether it is a podcast or a business, like that first year is extremely a grind because you are going from having this crazy vision in your life, an idea, vision in your head, and trying to bring it to life. And so literally I was off the grid for that entire first year. And then all the way for year 2 and year 3, I lightened up a little bit, but I was still pretty much off the grid. No regrets whatsoever, but definitely had to double down on myself. And what you're just talking about is a great example is last night. I literally was editing a podcast. I could have easily just finished editing that podcast and watched 30 minutes of YouTube and passed out. But I was like, you have told yourself going into this year, the quote I've been living by, open to everything, attached to nothing. Like, I love that. Okay, what is tonight's opportunity? This is speaking last night. I've never been to this overlook. That's something new. I was told that there's going to be other people there that I didn't know. Thankfully, you and Steve were there. So great to see you guys. But it was like, okay, I need to do this. Like, if the work isn't pressing and it can be done tomorrow, you need to make room. You've worked all day yesterday. You've worked from the time you sat down at 8 a.m. through till 5 p.m. Like, go. Just say yes. Just do it. And that's something that I've been even trying to get better at, is just is stepping away from the work. And I talked about this recently on a solo pod, is like how important breaks are. Is like you feel let's go. But you feel so more inspired and motivated. Like Sunday when I was flying back to LA, I was so fucking excited from Monday morning, because I was like,
I just took 10 days off the grid, no podcasting, no editing, no like nothing on Instagram. Like I really just tried to like step away, and I was like, I am so ready to get back to it. So I think the breaks are crucial for your mental and physical health, and then also just like it reignites that inspiration, and you need to step away.
There's always going to be more work to do. Always.
If you ain't smelling the roses, when you ever gonna smell it?
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
So you got to smell them roses, ladies and gentlemen.
I don't know if it was on your podcast or something I read in a book, but it was a quote, something along the lines of like, you can't delay your own happiness. Like there's not going to be more for you tomorrow just because you forfeited it today. Like you really have to take in those moments when they come.
Yeah. Enjoy it while you can. Jump on opportunities when they present themselves, all within reason.
Go watch the sunset with your friends.
Yeah. I'm happy I did that yesterday because not long ago, I just want to like, don't need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, because you just get in such a routine, and that was part of the tough part about COVID is like, I just got such an routine of being home, working all the time. And so now that things have opened up again, it's like, oh, well, now I have the option to
I need to work on this part of my life again.
Yeah.
That stillness was crucial, though. That COVID,
absolutely.
Man, it was... It
necessary.
got me back into podcasting.
Painful and necessary.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, totally. Man, I pulled so much stuff from your Instagram, just creeping.
I'm here for it.
It's fucking great. There was a photo/video of chocolate pancakes that you made on your IG, which let me tell you, they looked fantastic. You open up a pancake shop, I will be there.
Hell yeah.
But you talk about how you used to think that you didn't quote unquote deserve food like this if it wasn't followed by a 2-hour workout.
Yep.
And I love that you said, bye-bye toxic thoughts. Hello, food freedom. I love that. How have you learned to quiet and shut out these type of toxic thoughts? Even if it's not just, the food is definitely an important piece I think a lot of people deal with, but how have you learned, even if not just food, how do you tune out these toxic thoughts that can happen at any moment in time?
I think I was actually hoping that you would ask about this because
Let's go.
It's something that I haven't
talked about.
I have, but not on a podcast. I've spoke on a few different panels about on eating disorders and like, body dysmorphia and things along those lines. And I think it's something, I would say it's probably predominantly women. At least statistics show that it's a predominantly women issue. It's not to say that guys don't deal with it too, but I think for much of my teens and my early 20s, I just had I didn't realize it at the time, but I had a very disordered way of functioning around food. Even though I was very healthy, that was almost somewhat of the problem. I just avoided like entire food groups. And if I did eat something, it'd be followed by this like incredible wave of guilt, or I would just I'd be in such a bad mood. I would sleep all day. I mean, it was bad, but at the time I just didn't know anything different. This is like I think I'd say it probably lasted for 5-6 years,
like high school years,
late high school, early 20s, and I thought I was doing like the healthy things because I was eating healthy foods, and it wasn't. I never. It never got to the point of like eating nothing. I was never anorexic, but the types of thoughts that went through my head, now being able to have this different perspective, looking back, it's so crazy that I ever thought that this was normal. But when you're in these thoughts, that's all you really know. And so I think that one beautiful thing that's actually come out of social media is being able to connect with, and I follow a lot of women who have been through similar experiences. Shout out to my girlfriend, Ali Bonar. She's been like a huge inspiration to me. She runs a company called Oat House. She's all about body positivity, and she's gone through a very similar experience. And I think that as a woman or man, to our point about, going to watch the sunset, going to take that opportunity, not attaching food to like a value, like being good or bad. Food is food. There's food that is more nutritionally beneficial to you, but there's also food that, is incredible to indulge in and supports you and your happiness in other ways. I think that part of shifting those thoughts has like really been recognizing my self-worth and who I am and what I bring to this world has absolutely nothing to do with the way that I look, and what number, like I have on the scale. I always think it's so fun. I haven't weighed myself in years, and I will keep it that way. You know, I'm working out 5 days a week, and I really couldn't care less because it's not, to me, it's not about the way that I look anymore. And if you had asked Sydney, 4 or 5 years ago, she would not have said the same thing. It was like only to look a certain way. But there's such a level of freedom when you can step into valuing yourself for what other people value you for. And I think when I started to realize that no one gave a shit how much I weighed, and quite honestly, they never noticed, if I had lost 10 pounds, gained 10, no one ever noticed, no one ever cared, no one's ever going to care as much as you do. And no one's going to love you any less because your weight is not what you think it should be. I think that our bodies have we have an internal guiding system. And I think when people are dealing with, on one end of the spectrum, like being anorexic or having disordered thoughts, or like binging, I realized that so much of my issues with food was attached to feelings of like inadequacy and like trying to fill myself with something that I wasn't getting emotionally. And so food can be this like a very emotional experience for so many people. But when you finally, and this is not a quick or easy or like one-step process, but when you do take the time to address where those emotions are coming from, then the cravings or the disordered thoughts, like they just disintegrate. So I think it's so much more. I'd say the funniest thing about having disordered thinking about food is that none of it's actually about the food. So I think really, really honing in on that and honing into my values and who I am and what I bring to this world is, it's made all the difference.
Yeah, it's an interesting time because the podcast I have coming out on Monday is with a girl named Lacey Rogers, who was on America's Next Top Model.
I know who she is.
But she went through a very similar process in high school where she was being bullied. She dealt with not eating, and didn't take till years later for her to look back and go, wow, I was intentionally counting under like 1,000 calories a day just because I didn't feel like I fit this perfect mold. Right. And and she similarly was just like, I don't weigh myself. I don't look at the number. And I think it's not about the number on the scale. It's about how do you feel today? And it's also not based on how do you look in the mirror. It's just how do you feel about your body? Yes. And then it just comes down to balance. Like if you eat brownies every single day, every hour of the day, you're not going to feel good because that food is not meant to fuel you for the right ways. And I think that's the biggest shift that I had, is not looking at it as like foods that are bad for me or calories, but how do they actually make me feel when I eat it? And so then balancing it out where it's like, I know certain foods, it gives me energy for the day. It makes me motivated. I know these foods are going to make me feel tired and make me want to go to sleep.
Yeah, take a nice long nap.
Yeah, so it's like, what does that balance look like? But yeah, it unfortunately is something that a lot of people in that 13, 14, all the way through high school, early 20s, like our minds are just so, maybe it's changing now because of the world with like, how, the positive side of the internet is, maybe there's a girl that's going to listen to this podcast that's 14 years young and like her mind is being blown just by what you said. And she's like, wow, why do I even care what the number is? So I hope that because of the communication that we have with people all over the world through all these social media platforms, that it is helping people. But
I think it's definitely, as with anything on social media, like it could be a double-edged sword. It really all starts with the input that you allow yourself to have. So I went through a period of like unfollowing a lot of people that were triggering to me in some way. And it's not any, diss to them. It's like you really have to do what's best for you at the end of the day.
Yeah. If it feels good.
If it feels right,
just
feels aligned.
Just do it. Your 5 rules for living the most fulfilled, impactful life include generosity, gratitude, connect, service, and bravery. Which rule has been the most relevant in your life in the past 6 months?
I would say connect, both to other people, but also to myself. I think that, bravery is like an everyday task. I think that the more you connect to yourself and the more you take time, we had lots of time during COVID to be still. And the more clear you get with things, the easier everything else works out. I think that I know when I feel a little bit frazzled, it's typically because I'm not as connected as I should be, and I'm just trying to like grasp at things that I think are going to fulfill, this feeling or this task or whatever it may be. But the more you connect and the more you can get clear, the simpler it all is.
I love that word, frazzled. I don't know if I've ever even heard anybody use it. Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. And I also think there's something important about, I was just reading this book of this girl I had on a podcast a couple months ago. It's called What I Wish I Knew About Love, and the difference of, kind of similar, but a little bit different, but solitude versus loneliness.
So different.
And I think that is like, God damn, that's probably like one of the best things that I've learned in the last couple of years is like to be comfortable being alone. Like I'm an extrovert.
Yes.
I want to be around people all the time. Like there was a little hesitation when I got home, back Sunday, and both Robbie and Dan tell me, yo, we're gone this weekend. I'm like, what do you mean? I got the whole place to myself. What am I supposed to do? Who am I going to talk to? Like talk to the walls? There is that little hesitation. And then I go, no, this is great because it gives me time to have peace and quiet. And I think we're both in a place in our life now where we see it as solitude. We don't see it as loneliness. And we also recognize like how important it is with the lifestyles that we live. But there have been times I know back in my life where I would look at that as loneliness. And like, why don't I have people to be around? Why don't I have people to text? Like, what is it? Me. And instead of changing the perspective, going, wow, this is beautiful. I have time to myself. I have time to reflect. And I think that's been a big shift that I've seen. And
if you had to pick one rule on that list, what would it be for you?
And for the last 6 months that have been, I'm not going to use gratitude because that's a tatted on my hand. So I feel like that's an easy like out. Service. Because that is why I got back into podcasting. It was just so much downtime. And this time last year from like March, April, May, and June, I was throwing all these ideas to the wall. I was like, I bought a surfboard, did that for a couple weeks. I bought an Xbox One, got back into gaming for a couple weeks. I had my parents ship out my golf clubs, did that for a couple weeks. And I was like, these are fun, but like,
it's just not it.
It's just like, I'm not feeling
means
it.
To an end.
It's just like, what is the purpose of this? Like the golfing, I already have other things that I do to work out. The surfing was fun, but it was just like such a full day commitment that I was like, I don't want to commit my whole day to it. I love being on the beach, but I don't love this surfing thing. Golf was like, this is cool, but I don't actually enjoy the sport. I don't know. It was just like so many different things. Or the Xbox was like, I was like replaying like my high school days. Like, oh, it's going to be fun connecting with the homies again. But it's like all the homies have moved on. You know what I mean? I'm like fucking sick. I'm like talking shit to some 12-year-old and who knows where in the world. I was like, this is over. But it was once again, it was just like leaning into like, I miss podcasting. It was something that was such an identity for me for 3 years. It was like, why don't you get back into it? Like,
do you remember the moment where you're like, is this it?
Yeah. Like questioning if like this was, crazy timing. I was flying back from Massachusetts. It was this time. It was July. Wow. It was July of last year.
So you're flying back here from home?
I was flying back. Yeah. I was like, had all the feels from being home and like, that's light bulb moment. Just you asking that question because I had stillness. I was back home visiting family. I wasn't around LA and all these instant gratifiers of like parties and going here and seeing this person doing this. I was back home to stillness and a lot of time to reflect in the summertime. And I remember on the flight back, it was like leading up to July of last year, I was putting out a solo pod once every like 4 weeks. I was just like, all right, let's put out a podcast, you know? And then on the flight back, I remember writing the script for a podcast called Don't Overthink It. I think it was episode 13 of this podcast. It was like, Don't Overthink It or something like that. And I wrote out the script on the flight, like, you know what you want to do. Stop coming up with these excuses of like, you can't get back into the game or like this rebrand is like a shift and like, it's not the same. And I got back and I just knew, I was like, this is what I'm going to fucking do. I'm going to put out a solo pod a week. I'm going to put out a guest pod a week. I'm going to go full throttle and did that up until this would be the 1 year in July.
Wow.
So
I'm so honored to be here for the 1 year.
Yeah, this would literally be it. So, and that's awesome. When I recognize the service is like, it's such a service to myself, but also to the people that listen.
Yeah. Me, your number one fan, listening to every episode.
Let's go. But it's I don't know. even the podcast with Lacey, we were talking about like therapy and how that's been beneficial for her. And she was funny. She's like, I just fucking hate how it costs so much. Like, it's not fair. Like, you want to help me, but like it costs a lot of money. And I was laughing with her, but I was like, this is my therapy.
Yeah.
A lot of the solo pods is my therapy, and I get to say the things that are on top of mind.
You get to speak what's on your heart.
Speak whatever's on my heart and put it out there to the world and see who listens. So service is definitely the one that's been most relevant in my life for sure.
I think too, this will be such a special thing for you to look back on like 10 years from now, because you will, I bet, I mean, I could be wrong, but I bet you can listen to each episode and remember where you were in your life based on what you decided to talk about.
Yeah. There's no doubt about that.
I mean, I think that's what's so special about it is like, I think when you do those solo podcasts, like from a listener standpoint, people get like a peek inside your inner world. Like what's Bobby thinking about? Like what's on his mind? Oh, it's probably this, because this is what he decided to talk about this week.
Now I got to ask a question, and I wouldn't have asked this because I usually don't like talking about myself. What's been from what you've heard in the last couple months, couple weeks, what has been a takeaway or a realization that you've had?
Oh man, honestly, I don't know if I've learned so much, and I know I've said this to you before separately, but you have a way of connecting with people that I think is really special, because I've heard many of the same people that you've interviewed on other podcasts, and the conversation and what I learn about them is so different. And so I think that's one piece of it. And I think the second piece of it is like watching you, not even like the actual content of the podcast, which is a whole nother piece, but watching you do this when no one's watching. Well, I mean, everyone's watching and listening, but you know what I mean? Like when you are your own boss and you're the only person to hold yourself accountable, that to me is like the most inspiring thing, because like you could, hang up the microphone tomorrow and say like, I don't want to do this anymore. But this is the most, I find it so incredibly inspiring, like that you just keep pumping it out and you keep going through the motions, getting those reps in. And the actual content of the podcast has been amazing. I find you personally one of like the most inspiring people I know, with like the messages that you preach and the motivation that you bring. And it comes so naturally from you.
Well, and I greatly appreciate that. It fucking means the world to me. And I think the only reason it comes natural is because of what you just said. I just have continuously put in the reps that it has just naturally grown. And I think if people really saw like the number of plays per episode, they would literally ask like, why do you still do it? But I'm just like, I just fucking know that like the day is going to come when the opportunity is ready, is presented to me, and I'm going to smash this baby out of the park. Like, and that's what I know. Is I just know all it takes is one. And so I'm just focusing on the 24 hours at a time of what can I can control. I knew waking up today, I have this podcast, fired up about that. Tomorrow I'll worry about the podcast I have on Friday. It's just like, what are the controllables, and just fucking doing it to the highest possible level that I can do it at. But it's like the one question that I think is so easy to ask yourself, but also could be really hard to ask yourself when you find out the true answer is, if money was never an issue for the rest of your life, would you still be doing what you're doing? Or on the opposite end, what would you do if money was never an issue? And it's like, I'm still going to do this because I love the connection of people. I love every aspect of what this podcast platform gives to me. So that's where I'm like, I know I'm heading down the right path. Yep. Do I still have the limiting beliefs, and do I still question myself from time to time? Absolutely. More often than people probably even realize. I just choose not to push that energy to the world, because it's like, I'm not going to be a pity party of like, I'm not getting the right opportunities, or like, I'm not blah, blah. Like, I'm not going to be that guy. But I have those moments in my head, and I have to check myself and just go, well, why don't you look at where you are today and ask yourself, would you be here if you had stopped? I wouldn't have met Robbie, which means I wouldn't be living with him. I wouldn't have met Brandon Cohn, which means I wouldn't have the career at Liquid IV. I wouldn't have all these people that are around me if it wasn't for me continuously doing it. So it's like, well, I might not be doing it full time just yet, but looking at all the things that have come into my life from just continuously walking down this path, I got to keep doing it. And that's one thing I preach to people is like, you outside looking in, you can look at ratings, you can look at my downloads, you can look at all this stuff, but you can't measure all the real things that have come from it. So it's like, I'm just going to fucking keep doing it. 100%. And when the day is supposed to come, it'll blow up, the overnight success will happen, and all the years of just
the 10-year overnight success.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think too, this is something that I use to remind myself often is like if you were to tell your child self like where you are now, even though it may not be exactly where you want to be. I mean, as ambitious people, I know we always want to like take that next step. If you could tell yourself and be like, dude, like look at all these people you've met. Look at everything that's happened. Like, would you be able to believe yourself? Like, would you be so amazed? Be like, what the fuck? I did that.
Crazy.
I did that.
Yeah.
That's sick. And I think that it helps to put things into perspective because when you're in it and it starts to feel, air quotes, normal, and you don't no longer see it from the outside perspective, it's like really powerful to be able to take a step back and, it's the cheesy quote of like, look at where you are now and remember where you wanted to be, today, 5 years ago.
That's the biggest thing that I always get when I go home is it's like this like emotional timeline because I'm seeing like
I have that same feeling. Even when I go, it's only 20 miles away, but when I go home physically being it's like this it's like a nostalgic feeling, but also like I remember this is where so many of my ideas were born and I feel that too.
Yeah. It's good though. It's good to, obviously we're go-getters. We want to keep moving forward and we want to keep getting to the next destination and whatnot. But when you take that time to actually pause and look at where you came from, it's like, all right, if I've gotten to here, then it's unquestionable that at some point I'm going to get to whatever that vision looks like moving forward. Mm-hmm. So it's just taking those time to slow down and actually reflect and think about it. This is great. Final cues and we'll kind of wrap up. Quick kind of cues. Kind of going similar along that lines. If you could go back and tell yourself one piece of advice, what would it be and where would this be in your life that you would go back to?
Oh man, that is a tough one. So many different points in my life where I could have interjected some wisdom. I think honestly, I think that the time that's most top of mind for me would probably be right when I was starting Toto, Madeby, now Toto. I think because I really didn't know how I was going to get from point A to B. I just, just kept going, putting in the reps every single day and learning slowly but surely. And I think that the lesson that I would give myself is that having the power to continue on is going to, and the mindset to continue on is going to outwork the people who have all of these degrees and have all this experience any day of the week. Because at the end of the day, like your mindset, it truly is everything. It's what's going to, inspire you to work hard, inspire you to think outside the box. And I think that one of my biggest assets in many ways along this journey has been not being in this industry and having this deep knowledge of like what the normal things are to do, because my brain just isn't naturally attuned to thinking the normal way. So we've, come up with so many different creative ideas, some very exciting things that will be coming soon. I can't wait to share. That are definitely unconventional and out of the box. But I think that, it can be a huge asset when you just own who you are. So mindset and own it.
Yeah.
Own it.
Yeah. Be you.
Yeah.
And don't compare yourself and just fully go.
Comparison is the thief of joy.
Oh, that is the damn truth. What's an area of your life you need to put more effort into?
Oh man. I think I'm really proud of myself, honestly, for the commitments that I've made to myself to keep, like, working out in the morning and just like going through those motions. So I think that I feel pretty solid on that. Maybe something that I would like always love more of is like just that time with friends and that being present. I mean, the faster things move, which is every single day, it's, harder and harder to be present. But once I like to think that I'm a relatively aware person. So I think it's just about like, once I finally gain that awareness that I'm extremely not present, then from that point on, I'm like, okay, we need to disconnect here. But yeah, I think learning how to slow down.
That's good. Yeah, it's definitely something that I think is relevant for myself and for a lot of people. But it's always a work in progress.
Yes.
One thing that on a personal was really awesome for me to see was the connection my sister had with you when she was here.
I love her. If she's listening, I miss
I'm
you.
sure
Love
she's
you.
got a notepad out for this entire episode and taking notes. But, that's one thing that when she was leaving LA, and I talked to her about you when I was back over this past week, or I didn't talk about this, but one thing when she was leaving LA and she had spoke so highly about you and how oh my God, she fucking bubbles. Oh yeah. Bubbles for, having a conversation with you. But it was so cool for me because I think, and I can't speak on her behalf, but I feel like you're one of the first women really that she's ever met that is like a founder and is like fucking owns it and is just like a boss woman, and I was like, that is so cool for her to like meet somebody like you, because I think it empowers her. And I think it, she's like the most spiritual bee, and she like, I don't have to worry about her. I know she's just like marching to the beat of her own drum, but I was like so happy when I thought about that. I was like, wow, this is really like something cool for her to connect and like see you. Totally. My question would be is, how do you want to inspire or empower other women? And that's something that even I've been doing a better job of like intentionally looking to get more women on the podcast, because I unintentionally was just like meeting people and I was like, oh yeah, let's get you on. Oh wow, the last 30 episodes were all guys.
Yes.
But now I'm like, I'm holding myself accountable to like, yes, there are these guys you really want to interview, but like, let's try to show a balance and maybe do so that your sister has people to look up to that are women.
Totally.
So how do you want to empower or inspire other women?
I think that as a women business owner, business is business, and a lot of business is, in theory, it can be a lot of tough decisions and, leading with logic and leading with, whole lots of numbers, all of which are very important. But I will say that I find female founders and business owners incredibly inspiring, and I think that they no diss to the guys, but I think that women truly have such a special superpower because they have a level of compassion and understanding that is beyond, it's just beyond what I've personally witnessed in a lot of like, maybe more like logic driven companies. And I think that I, especially, this being a first time founder and being a solo founder, I was getting wrapped up in the idea of like needing to be more assertive and be more manly, and it didn't feel natural to me. And I've realized that you can be an extremely powerful leader and be compassionate and be vulnerable and talk about, eating disorders and talk about, cancer and sickness and having these weaknesses because you're a real whole person. And I think that leading with compassion and not being afraid to show your weaknesses just shows your strength. I'd say that. And I think also as women, I think that we have a competitive nature. And I think that, as a quote says, a rising tide lifts all boats. The more we succeed alone, the more we can succeed together. So just empowering like your fellow female founders and business owners, and whether they're a competitor or they're in a different space. I know that I definitely went through a period of that too, where I was like, oh, well, if they do good, maybe that means that we're not going to do as well. And it just, I've totally reframed my mindset, because a rising tide really does lift all boats, and the better someone does, the more attention it will get you too. And as long as you're being true to yourself and your story, and like that's all you can really ask for.
That's beautiful. I also think seeing other people win and succeed just shows you it's proof of concept.
It shows you what's possible. Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah,
so true.
No, it's beautiful. What's the first step anyone can take to reaching their inner potential?
The most important thing, believe. It's the hardest thing, but it's the most important thing. And it has to be, true and through without. I think that the deeper belief, the deep knowing that you can have, and be also being okay, like if that belief changes, and just continuing to honor that new truth is incredibly important. Sometimes when people think that they're reaching their inner potential, the first path that they take may not be the right path, but it may be the right path to get them to their next path. So just continue to believe that what you're feelings are your inner guidance system. And I think that the more that people tune into that and stop resisting things for the logical reasons, the happier they'll be and the farther they'll go.
Yeah, that's a great mindset to have, is that even though you might think you're on the right path and you find out it's not, well, that just got you one step closer to where you really need to be.
It's so true.
So I think that's really important. What is one challenge for the listeners you have today? If they made it through the last 70-ish minutes of this podcast, as they wrap up this podcast, what is one challenge you have for them today?
I'm reading a book called The Artist's Way. It's incredibly fascinating. Have you read it?
Definitely have it.
Yeah, it's really good. And part of The Artist's Way talks about something called morning pages, but it can be done at any time of day. It's somewhat my journaling style, but I would challenge the people listening to open a notebook or grab a piece of paper, notebook, whatever, any sort of like writing surface and a pen or pencil, and just sit there for at least 30 minutes in stillness and just see what comes out. It doesn't have to be anything logical. It doesn't need to be sentences. Maybe it's a drawing. I've found it's so incredibly therapeutic. And I also have realized, like, when I force myself to sit there and just like be and think, I may not think that I have anything to say, but you'd be surprised what comes out on paper.
I know. That was something that my 7th grade teacher got us doing. And
I love that.
I didn't. He was just like, you have to write for 10 minutes.
Very progressive.
I know. I didn't realize at the time. He's like, you have 10 minutes. You cannot lift up your pencil. You have to keep moving. You get an A+.
That's
and I was like, all right, I'm just going to keep writing. But my God, the amount of things that will come out from you just writing. And just because it's things that have to bubble up.
Yep.
And so at some point you're going to cross some bridges that maybe you didn't realize you were going to cross. But I think that's a really good challenge. I don't think I've ever had anyone, there might have been some journaling challenge at this point, but I think that's really important. That's really good.
It's effective.
Cindy Webb, 2 years. A lot's changed. I think chapter 3, when we do the 3rd podcast, is going to be even better. But
can't wait.
I have nothing but respect for you as a founder. Love the energy. Love that. Ever since I moved to Venice, I think I've seen you more in the last 6-7 months than I've seen you since we met like 2 years. But like I was just saying, like, really, my sister was so thoroughly excited to have met you, and to me, it was just like so proud that she met you, because I know how much of an inspiration you've already played to her. But just everything, why you do what you do, I think is really important. I think that's always I don't care if you build cardboard boxes for a living, if you if you own a coffee shop, whatever you do, I want to know why you do it. And I think the why of which you have built is incredibly important. And I know that Toto is going to go on to grow into this massive brand, and I will 100% be a food tester or a cookie tester when needed.
Chief Cookie Testing Officer.
Was that Chief CC?
CCTO.
Let's go. Get me in on that, but just nothing but love and respect for you, and I appreciate you taking the time to be on the pod today.
Thank you so much.
This has been great. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a favor to ask from you, beautiful ladies and gentlemen. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please, please, please screenshot this episode, post it to your IG story, tag Sydney. I love Sydney's IG because she also has an absurd amount of A's.
True.
So her handle is SYDNEYOLIVIAAAH. Sydney Olivia. I'll have it tagged up in the description of this podcast. Tag her, tag me at Babe. That's B-O, 3 B's, 4 A's, and a Y. Let us know what the biggest takeaway was, what the biggest learning was. We are both extremely curious to hear what you learned, so please share it out. As well as I will have Toto's actual Instagram linked up in the description. That is TOTOFOODSCO, as well as our website is TOTOFOODS.co. That will be linked up in the description. I highly recommend you buy some cookie dough, you bake it, or matter of fact, just when it comes in, get out a spoon and just eat that shit out of it. Out of the fucking packaging, because who doesn't love raw cookie dough? I mean, it's absolutely amazing.
Delicious.
Sydney Webb, thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Bobby.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Bearded Man Podcast. See ya!